Yo, what's up guys, Celeste here. In this video I want to give you a good understanding of the fundamentals of fighting in Albion. This guide is mainly meant for small scale roaming parties, but some of the information will translate into different types of PvP content as well. While making this guide I really struggled with the structuring of the knowledge, since for explaining one concept you would need to understand another concept. In the end, I chose to keep the information as simple as possible and talk more about all the variables to take note of in a fight and cover in which sense they are important, and not go in too much detail of how to play in specific situations. I will probably make a future video which covers more advanced topics, but for now I hope my knowledge will set a good foundation for your mindset and help you improve faster in PvP. Anyways, let's get into the video. When fighting or shot calling, I like to think in win conditions. By win conditions, I mean the actions and decisions you can make in specific situations which will have the highest chance of enabling you to win a fight. Before we can talk more about the specific conditions, or actually like the variables that come into place, we will first need to get a good understanding of what a win is. In my opinion, a good definition of a win will be reducing your opponent's HP to 0 before they reduce your HP to 0. This definition is really obvious in a 1v1 fight, but for group fights, a little more variables will come in place. So for this definition, we can add a little side note in the gist of killing more opponents or killing more opponents of a specific role before they kill your allies. If you break this definition down, we can say that a win condition is determined by offensive and defensive actions. When going out as a group, you will need players focusing on the offensive side of a fight and players focusing on the defensive side of a fight. Items in Albion all have their own spells. Some of these spells can be used offensively, some only defensively, and some can be used in both ways. The combination of the items a player is wearing is called a build. Albion is in essence a classless system, but to simplify, we can put certain builds into main classes and from there determine if they mainly focus on the offensive or defensive side of a fight. Do note that this is an abstraction and that in practice most builds will have a hybrid function of both offense and defense, or can be played in a whole different way depending on the situation. The tank, characterized by its high amount of crowd control, health and resistances, can be played both offensively and defensively. An offensive tank will use its crowd control to group up and hold opponents in place. Offensive tanks are also referred to as engaged tanks for this reason. A defensive tank will use its crowd control to stop an opponent from engaging. Defensive tanks are also called disruptive tanks, disengaged tanks or peel tanks. The support, characterized by its abilities to increase the offensive and defensive capabilities of all other players, can be played in both offensive and a defensive way. An offensive support will allow the team to engage more efficiently, while a defensive support will allow the team to soak up or avoid damage. They do this by buffing their allies, debuffing their opponents, and cleansing crowd control and debuff effects from their allies. The healer, characterized by its ability to restore health of themselves and other players, play as a defensive role. They can save people with instant heals, or they can heal people over time to sustain during a fight. The DPS, defined by its ability to deal large amounts of damage, play as an offensive role. They can burst down groups of opponents by using their ability synchronized, or they can deal damage by poking or applying damage over time effects on their enemies. When going out as a group, there will be a distribution of these jobs. This is also known as a team composition, or abbreviated as comp. It's important to know what your job is when playing on a certain build, since this will allow the comp to get to its win condition. Before we can get into specific team compositions, we need to understand the flow of a fight. By flow, I mean the specific actions a group tries to perform around the cooldowns of their abilities and the actions of their opponents. The team composition will determine which state of a fight will favor them to work towards their win condition. Before a fight starts, both teams will start posturing. Posturing is the act of getting into a specific position where your role needs to be in. I will explain more about positioning later on in the video. When a group is positioned correctly, they will start poking their opponent. Damaging a group will form a threat to them, which in turn will force them to start moving into a certain direction. While both teams are having this back and forth, the engage tanks are looking for an opportunity to engage. The engage is the moment where one group decides to synchronize all their abilities together to kill their opponent. When a group engages, they will use all their offensive abilities at the same time. In turn, the receiving end will have to use their defensive abilities to negate and absorb this damage. After one group is done with their engage, the other group can choose to counter engage since they only use their defensive abilities and still have their offensive abilities ready. Or they can choose to kite and stabilize if they took a big hit. Sometimes both groups engage at the same time, and both offensive and defensive abilities are being used. When both groups have their main abilities on cooldown, they will start brawling. During brawling, the goal is to secure kills after the engage and to threaten the opponent, forcing them into a certain direction, which in turn won't allow them to engage or will set up your next engage. With specific team comps, kills can also be made during brawling. Most of the times, fights will rotate between the engage, counter engage and brawl stages. Sometimes, however, a fight gets reset and starts again from the posturing stage. During a fight, players are moving around a lot. To understand movement, we need to get a base understanding of pressure first. Pressure is the term we use for how much of a threat one group opposes towards an enemy at a specific time. Sometimes pressure is also called momentum. A clear example of pressure is when one group is full health and the other group is nearly dying. Another way of seeing pressure is to say which group is closer to their win condition. Moving can be characterized in three ways: chasing, kiting or holding. Based on the stage of the fight, the momentum and team composition, a group will decide where they have to move to. Chasing is the act of walking towards your opponent while they walk away while still applying damage. Chasing is done when your group has more momentum and the opponent is trying to run or kite away. Kiting is the act of walking away from your opponent while still poking them. Kiting is done when an opponent has more momentum and your group needs to stabilize. Holding is the act of not positioning yourself closer or further from an enemy. Holding is done when your group can't chase further or when your group can't kite any further. To elaborate a bit on these three concepts of moving, you need to understand that abilities and basic attacks have a stand time while casting. When kiting, the opponent will cast an ability which allows your group to gain more distance from them. When you are out of range, they can't deal damage anymore, hence you will relieve pressure. Do note that holy healers also have to stand still while casting, so you can only kite as far as where your healers can reach. Which brings me to positioning. The first rule of positioning is to spread as much as possible at all times. As we covered earlier, groups will look for clumps to engage on. If you don't stay spread, you will do half the work for them, helping them to reach their win condition. Next to that, which is also the reason groups will run with engage tanks, is because Albion has a mechanic called AoE escalation. AoE escalation causes abilities to deal more damage when they hit more people. By staying spread, you will effectively reduce your opponent's damage without the usage of defensive abilities. When engaging, the whole group will have to hit on the same position. In order to get in range of that position, the group will naturally clump. This is also the reason why counter engages can be very effective. The way to minimize clumping is to start forming flanks, basically meaning that one half of the group attacks from one side while the other half attacks from the other side. This way it's easier to spread after an engage, and if a counter engage comes in, all defenses can be used on one side of the group while the other side is free to poke. To go a bit deeper into positioning, we can take a look at the specific roles of the people in the party. A simple way to look at positioning of a group is to separate them in two. You will have a front line, consisting of the tanks and the melee brawlers, and the back line, which consists of support, burst DPS and healers. Within the front line, the brawlers are furthest in front, since they have builds which allow them to self-sustain without the help of their healers. From this position they can apply pressure on the enemy backline. Behind the brawlers you have the tanks. They will form the barrier between the front and the backline. The combination of their health, resistances and crowd control allows them to prevent opponents from walking into the backline. Within the backline you have your supports, healers and burst DPS. Supports run on builds with a lot of resistances and can stay in range of the tanks and the rest of the backline to offer support where needed. The builds of healers and burst DPS are focused on healing and damage output, which makes them very vulnerable. To sustain the pressure the enemy melees are applying, the burst DPS will have to keep poking them and the healers will have to heal the DPSs and themselves. This is just a short abstraction of positioning. In future videos I'll cover the positioning of specific team compositions, roles and weapons. The simplest way to understand team compositions and what their win conditions are is to look at the repeating section of the flow of a fight. Engages and brawling. If you want to win on engages, you run a clap comp. If you want to win while brawling, you will run a brawl comp. A mix between the two comps is called a balanced comp. Clap and brawl comps both have their strengths and weaknesses. I won't fully go into theory crafting and team compositions in this video, but if we take a look at the roles we talked about earlier, we can get a good understanding on how these comps work. The comps are based on their damage type. A brawl comp shines at sustain damage and a clap comp shines at burst damage. In order to make a brawl comp work, you are more reliant on continuous pressure. Since brawl comps mainly consist of melees, engaging can be dangerous because they have to clump to deal their damage. The brawl comp generates continuous pressure by having builds with self-sustain and damage over time. Having continuous pressure will allow the group to disrupt the enemy positioning, since when a threat is posed the opponent will have to kite away from the threat. The win condition for a brawl comp will be to apply enough pressure on the opponent's backline, causing them to not being able to fully utilize their clap DPS and their healers, which leads to outsustaining them in the long run and winning the fight. By being far forward, healers need to be very mobile, while the peel tanks and supports allow the healers to step up and stay safe while doing so. In order to make the clap comp work, you are more reliant on engages. Since clap comps mainly consist of burst DPS, failing an engage can be dangerous, because after a failed engage there are very few options to regain momentum. The clap comp can create good engages by having their tanks form clumps and their support players purging the opponent's defensives. The win condition for a clap comp will be to get enough kills as soon as possible to not allow the opponent to use their comp to their full potential. By playing clap only, the group needs to be able to move in and out fast, followed by tanks holding the opponent from moving in on the way back. We now know the basics of how a fight takes place, and it is time to get into actually fighting. The key concept in group fighting is to work as a group. And in order to work as a group, you need to understand your job and how your abilities allow you to do your job. In future videos I'll talk more about how to play a specific role with their respective builds, but for now I'll go over the general ability rotation and usage of common items. As said earlier, items and abilities have an offensive and a defensive purpose. I'll list an overview on items that are common in most builds and that are meta at the moment and will highly likely stay the meta as well for a long time. Common helmet pieces you see are the Knight Helm and the Mercenary Hood. The Knight Helm protects you and nearby allies from forced movement. This ability will allow you to push into your opponent more effectively on an engage or to not get clumped when the opponent is engaging on you. The Mercenary Hood allows you to cleanse yourself and nearby allies from any debuffs and crowd control. This will allow you to push into your opponent when they try to block you, or to survive an engage by removing crowd control and pierces. Common bodies you see are the Judicator armor, Guardian armor, Hellion jacket and Cleric robe. The Judicator armor places the dome on your position, increasing the resistances and healing received for all allies standing in it. This ability is used to prevent an opponent from damaging on their engage and heal more effectively to sustain the damage. The Guardian armor slows and reduces damage from opponents nearby. This ability is used to reduce the effectiveness from an opponent's engage. The Hellion jacket damages opponents nearby and heals you. This ability is used to sustain yourself longer in the opponent's backline as well as keeping up the pressure. The Cleric robe will prevent you from taking any damage and increases damage or healing output. This ability is used when getting engaged on, when being pressured during brawling, or used when engaging to amplify the damage and countering reflex. Common boots you see are Scholar Sandals, Hunter Shoes and Royal Sandals. Scholar Sandals regenerate your energy while also providing immunity to crowd control. This ability is used to kite back after going in. Hunter Shoes give a large amount of movement speed and increase crowd control duration. This ability is used to run into an enemy to start the engage. Royal Shoes give an increase in damage and reduction in resistances. This ability is used to run in during an engage, deal damage and walk back out. Do note, this ability goes on cooldown after it ends, so try to cancel it as soon as possible. The potion slot will almost always contain a resistance potion. A resistance potion will reduce the crowd control effects and the damage you take. This ability is used before damage comes in. There are many more items that can be used during a fight, but it will take too long to go in detail on all of them for this video. In order to have many individuals working together in the most efficient way possible, larger groups have one person dedicated on instructing people on what to do, where to do it and when to do it. This person is called the shot caller. Each shot caller has their own style of calling, and the following information might vary a bit depending on your caller. In the description I'll post a link to all the different calls I make with an overview of what is expected from each role. In order to follow a shot caller, you must always have him or her on your screen. This way you are close enough to perform the required actions when necessary, and it will help your caller to see what is going on with the group as a whole. When a caller calls a direction, it will also be from their perspective. By seeing where they are, you also know in which direction they want you to do something. Let's start with the basic calls for movement. As you remember, we can kite, hold and chase. When kiting, the DPSs need to poke the opponents while walking into a certain direction. In the meanwhile, the healers will get everyone back to full health and the peel tanks will need to hold the opponent off from chasing in the opposite direction. While kiting, it is important to spread out. By spreading, the opponent will deal less damage, allowing for your healers to stabilize the group. Sometimes the caller asks to back out or full run into a certain direction. In this case, the DPSs will have to focus more on moving than on poking. When holding, everyone needs to stop moving closer or further away from the opponent. Peel tanks will have to stop the opponent from moving in further, and DPSs will need to poke the opponents to out-sustain them and be able to not have to walk further away from them. Sometimes the caller will ask the melees to start living inside the opponent. By doing this, the opponent's backline won't be able to come in, which allow the group to sustain while holding their ground. When chasing, everyone will need to walk into a certain direction. Peel tanks will try to stop the opponent from running away, and the DPSs will keep poking the opponent to apply pressure and find kills. Sometimes the caller will ask you to run over your opponent. All DPSs should move up here and be inside the opponent. By doing this, the group will already be positioned to keep dealing damage before they have to start chasing the opponent, and lose damage by having to move in between attacks. Next to the movement of a group, a caller will also ask for certain actions. When getting engaged on, the caller will call for defenses. When defenses are called, supports and tanks will have to use their protective abilities. Healers will have to use their abilities to keep everyone alive while they are taking damage. When you get clumped, you will have to use your own resistance potion to reduce the damage taken. When playing on a cleric rope, you will also use this ability as soon as possible to negate all incoming damage. When engaging, a caller will do a countdown, so that everyone is able to synchronize their damage on the clump. This is a 5 or 3 seconds countdown, depending on the situation and the caller. The speed of the countdown may vary as well. During a countdown, everyone should use their abilities in a way to guarantee the biggest hit. Let's take a 5-second countdown as an example and go over all the abilities that should be used. On 5, the engaged tanks will pop their boots and knight helmets, and DPSs will start forming flanks. On 4, the engaged tanks will look for the biggest group of opponents they can clump. On 3, Camlins throw their E abilities and DPSs might pop their boots already if they need to catch up. On 2, the Hand of Justice pulls more people into the Camlin. On 1, the clump is formed and the pierces and debuffs hit. And on 0, which isn't called, the opponent is fully grouped up and debuffed, allowing the DPS to kill them. During the engage, support players and the people with mercenary hoods can cleanse crowd control abilities to allow the group to not get stopped. DPSs will also use their knight helmets to prevent them from being blocked when going in. Since engages are timing sensitive, a lot of times a caller will indicate that the opponent will engage or that the group will engage soon. The caller will tell the group when they are looking for an engage or when the opponent is looking for an engage. Since looking for an engage is quite a mouthful of words, it's most of the time abbreviated to just looking. When the caller says we're looking, everybody should start moving towards the opponent and DPSs should start forming their flanks. When the caller says they are looking, everybody should spread even more and be ready with their knight helmets to prevent the opponent from forming a clump. This is it for this video. I'll post an extended fight of 2 equally matched groups on balanced comms in the description. Feel free to watch it and analyze it with the information you've just got. While watching, you can take a look at the different roles each group has and how they play. You will see the engaged tanks forming clumps and the disengaged tanks stopping the opponent. Supports will use their defensive and offensive buffs to help out the group, and you will see the DPSs hit their abilities at the same time on an engage and keep the pressure during brawling, all while the healers keep the party alive. Also take note of the flow of a fight, the engages, counter engages and the brawling, and how the momentum causes a group to kite, hold or chase. When looking at the positioning of groups, you will see to try to stay spread at all times, and all the different roles take a different position on the battlefield based on their build and job. Also take a look at how the group uses their abilities, both during engages and brawling. Everyone holds their E ability for the engage and uses their Q and W abilities during brawling. And the final thing to watch is to listen to the shot caller and see how his instructions causes the group to take different actions. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and learned something today. I'll see you all next time.